In every heartache, there's a hidden seed of strength. Join Portia Booker on The Grief Grantor as we journey through stories of resilience, finding gratitude in the echoes of grief. Together, we transform sorrow into strength, pain into purpose. Welcome to The Grief Grantor, where your healing journey begins.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Grief Grantor. I hope that everyone is doing amazing. I am your host, Portia Booker, is known as your grief awareness advocate. Don't forget to follow me on all social media platforms at Portia the Grief Grantor. So, you guys, I want to do a really quick check-in. 2023 is wrapping up for us. Would you believe that? Feels like just yesterday it was January 1 of 2023. And now we're already at the conclusion. And I want to start off with, first and foremost, this year has been a lot about gratitude for me. Those of you who have been following my journey, you know that my father made his transition in April of this year, and my mother, her transition was last year in July. One of the things that I learned from my father's transition was, number one, that even though we're not always present in every aspect of our life or in other people's lives, we don't always have to be absent either, right? The other thing that I learned this year was to be resilient, right? Through my journey of speaking about grief and gratitude, I've cultivated this level of acceptance and awareness where I can see the duality in all aspects of life, right? I have moments where I'm grieving and also grateful. I have moments where I'm sad, but I'm also experiencing joy. Like I shared with all of you on my Facebook a couple of weeks ago, where I went to dinner. I took myself to, not dinner, to breakfast. I love going to breakfast, y'all. I love good pancake, egg, and sausage breakfast. That's my favorite. And I noticed all the Christmas decorations that were around. And last year, during the holiday season, I felt the heaviness of my grief because I was focused on missing my mother, missing the family traditions that have transitioned along with my mother. But this year, I felt so much joy. I felt so much joy watching all these other families come in and celebrate with their little ones, or grandparents coming in to celebrate their 80th wedding anniversary, whatever it might have been. I found joy in being present in the moment. The other thing was being innovative. I would have never have dreamed that my TV show would make its debut 7 years after my TV career crumpled at NBC. But I always believe that a pivot in our life or a breakdown in our road to success can lead to a breakthrough at another period. You know, like they say, we're not retired, we're reinvented. So I believe I was reinvented through my grief journey of then 7 years ago, and even till now after my parents' transition. The other thing is being empowered. Like I say it all the time, you guys who follow me on Instagram, you see that I write in my gratitude journal that I'm grateful for my grief journey. I'm grateful for overcoming the societal narrative that tends to be placed on all of us when we're going through seasons of grief, right? And the other thing that I've cultivated is a level of forgiveness. Like I forgive like it's nobody's business, but it took from my father's transition for me to really start to forgive on a deeper level. Forgive myself for the things that I didn't know. Forgive myself for treating myself not so kind or saying things to myself that I wouldn't say to my friends or my loved ones. So I say this to all of you who are going into 2024. Really take some time to honor your journey where you're at, because I'm a firm believer that the seat that you currently occupy is where you need to be. So we're going to take a quick break right here on the Grief Grantor. When we come back, we have a very special guest who I believe is going to really set the tone for all of us to start off 2024 on a very positive note. So we'll be right back here on the Grief Grantor.
Are you ready to illuminate your path and embrace your true purpose? Welcome to the Secrets of Being retreat in the breathtaking landscapes of Costa Rica. Experience a life-changing journey, surrounded by the vibrant energy of nature. Make connections with like-minded visionaries and changemakers like yourself. Discover the power of love and light as we dive into transformative workshops, guiding you to unlock your highest potential and radiate positivity. Connect with the wisdom of the earth, immersing yourself in the beauty of Costa Rica. Let nature inspire your journey of self-discovery. Awaken the visionary within, and let your light guide you to create a positive impact on the world. Join us at the Secrets of Being retreat and shine bright. Reserve your spot now and take the first step towards a purposeful, inspiring life. Embrace the secrets. Embrace your light. Embrace your being.
All right, everybody, welcome back right here on the Grief Grantor. As I mentioned before we went to commercial break, that I want each and every one of us to go into the year 2024 with gratitude, with resilience, with feeling innovative, with feeling empowered, and also cultivating a level of forgiveness of ourselves and of other people. So today we have a very special guest who is joining us. I'm going to give a little background about who she is. So we are going to be joined by Miss Lucy Oliver, who is the founder of Reprecision Health, which is what I like to call a new program that focuses on nervous system. Our nervous system is a key part of us, especially when we're going through grief. There's so much unregulation that can tend to happen. So a little background about Lucy. Lucy, whose journey began through what I like to call a series of health complications. How many of us have had that? I'm sure that a lot of us who have been on the journey with me know about my mental health journey. And I have to say, Lucy is definitely a dynamic individual based on what I know about her. You know, she has a background in chemistry. She's also, like I said, crafted this amazing program that is going to guide so many different people, and already has, to newfound joy and freedom. And her story, very similar to mine, is there to help other people to build resilience and deep commitment to their healing, continue to inspire and change lives around the globe. So without further delay, welcome to the stage, Miss Lucy Oliver. Lucy, how are you today?
Hi, thank you so much, Portia. I'm doing very well. Thank you. Currently here in the Mexican jungle, one of our home bases of our programs. Very
Lucy,
happy to be here.
that is amazing. I mean, talk about the dream, right? I mean, we just saw before we went to break the retreat that's happening in Costa Rica that I'll be speaking at. And I'm excited to see what Costa Rica has in store. But I mean, you're in the jungle where it's probably, what's the temperature?
I'm not very good at Fahrenheit. I'm from England originally, but I think we're at about mid to high 80s right now. So yeah, in Celsius, it's around 27, 28. Nice bit of humidity. The jungle's so lush and green right now. No rain. It's a lovely place to spend the winter. I'm very grateful for being here during the winter.
You know, I could use a nice 80-degree day on the beach, just reading a nice book and soaking up some sun. So, Lucy, do me a favor. After we're done with this conversation, go outside, sneak some sunshine, and put it in a bag and mail it to me. I'll take it.
Away.
Lucy, you know, as I mentioned in the beginning, my show focuses on gratitude, and I just want to jump right in, right? You do a lot with what I like to call regulating our nervous system based on this program, this amazing program you've created. So in your approach, Lucy, how does gratitude play a transformative role in stabilizing our emotions?
Yeah, it's a great question. And gratitude can be so incredibly powerful. My background, like you mentioned, is in chemistry, and I studied a lot of neuroscience. And our programs here are focused mostly on neuroscience. We take a very scientific approach to nervous system regulation. also combines psychology and functional medicine. And what I found really fascinating was that a lot of these traditions, ancient traditions, can be proven through science. There's a lot of incredible studies, and we actually do something called QEEG brain mapping and neurofeedback as one of the modalities on the program. And so that means we actually measure the electrical activity in 19 different points on the brain. So we put this really sexy cap on where you can measure all these different points. And so we get a good map of the electrical activity in the brain. And then with neurofeedback, we're able to actually look at what's happening with the brain waves in real time. So in this instance, we're able to look at what happens to the brain waves when we're in a state of gratitude. There's other ways to measure that. It's called biofeedback. Another type is heart rate variability training. That's something that I really love. It was very helpful for me. It's really simple, but it's measuring the balance in the autonomic nervous system. These are lots of big words, but basically it's the balance between your fight, flight, activated system. So the one that keeps you safe from threats, it's looking for threats, and then our relaxation system, the one that puts us into a state of healing, digestion, and real deep relaxation. And so what's really cool is we can actually look at, when we're in a state of gratitude, what happens to the nervous system, starting with the brain waves and in that balance between the two systems. And so when we're looking at something like grief, it can feel like a threat to the body because something's been taken away, and it really affects the neurochemistry. And in addition to lots of other things that can shift, things that it can be financial changes, maybe even location changes, just so many shifts can happen. And the brain really loves it when things stay the same because it tries to be very efficient in the energy that it uses. So it has all of its neural pathways, and it takes a lot of energy to create a new neural pathway, which is why when we learn something new, it can feel quite tiring and draining. And so often the brain will just take this easiest, the path of least resistance. And so when it suddenly gets a jolt, it can feel like we're in this kind of survival mode, which actually makes it harder to get into a state of gratitude. It sort of narrows our focus in the brain. It's actually called narrow focus, where we become much more focused on survival and really making sure that we're safe from threats. And our brain really isn't designed to make us happy. It's designed to keep us alive by looking for these threats all of the time. And so to get into a state of gratitude, it's a case of training it. Just like we go to the gym to train biceps or legs and like build a muscle, it's very similar with gratitude, where we actually have to actively go into that practice to be able to train the neurons to fire together and start getting into that feeling of gratitude more frequently. But what's really cool is that once you do get into that, your brain actually starts to filter in positive information. So it's actually called the reticular activating system in the brain, where it filters in all of the information coming from our five senses. It's a ton of information. Your brain cannot process all of it. So it will pick out the information that it thinks is most important. And that filter is actually based on every single thing that has ever happened to you from conception to the present day, because that is how your brain was built. It's like a software system. It's been put together since day one, well, before even day one, you were just conceived. And it's based on the information it thinks it's important, it's going to pick out. And a great example is when you buy a certain model of car or a certain model brand of something, and you start seeing it everywhere because your brain started to implant that information. But the great thing is you can choose what you want to implant. Like, what do you actually want it to be looking for? How do you want to set the settings on the filter to filter in? And so with gratitude, I think when you're in that challenging situation, and we've all been in those challenging situations, it can be very hard. I feel very fake to be like, oh, I'm grateful for this, when actually it's like a really difficult situation. But over time, we can like flex that gratitude muscle. And in our neurofeedback, and when we look at actually what's happening to the brain waves, we see much higher alpha brain waves. And they're the brain waves that are linked to meditation, that feeling of bliss, letting go, and it's called more of an open focus. So when we get out of that narrow survival mindset and into more of an open focus, that's actually when we're able to be a bit more open to those things that are positive. And another example is if you actually go take a vacation and you're lying on the beach, very relaxed, you're more likely to notice the beautiful sunset, or how, you know, the little crabs on the beach, or something that might fill you with awe. Whereas when we're in a survival mode, again, I'm sure we all know how that feels, rushing in traffic or trying to get someone. We don't care about the sunset or what is happening. It's like, I just need to get this done. And so really trying to uptrain that part of the brain and get into those alpha waves more frequently will actually make it easier to start filtering in that positive information and seeing it more frequently. And the advantages of that is that when we're in that higher alpha brainwave mode, we actually produce more endorphins and serotonin, which can reduce pain, which can, elevates our mood. And so it can become this really positive feedback loop where we're able to exponentially create more of it.
Lucy, I got to ask this question. Okay, you brought up about the reticular activation system, right? And I'm curious, how can we use that to reprogram our brain during seasons of grief? Because like what you mentioned, gratitude, we have to program our brain to accept and allow gratitude into it, a gratitude practice. So how can we do that with grief in the same light?
Yeah, I think it can be really powerful and very simple practice, where it really is putting our attention onto those positive things, but really trying to feel into it, not just the very superficial, I'm grateful for this, I'm grateful for this, I'm grateful. Like, it doesn't, if it's just kind of coming from this rational mind level, it doesn't have quite as big of an impact, and we can actually see that when we're measuring it with the different biofeedback tools. But even something as simple as keeping a gratitude list, like you really set a time to do that. And so the reticular activating system, basically, the more you're putting attention on something, the more you're going to look for it. And the power of this is that, like, you can basically alter your reality with this, because everything that you see in the world is just how your brain is perceiving it. And so if you change how you perceive something and where your attention and energy goes, you'll have a very different life experience. And this is why every person, every human, have a very different lens in how we see the world. And like I just mentioned, that lens is built through all of these different events that happen during our life. And so you can change your lens. I mean, some people, they have a really tough lens. They were dealt a very difficult set of hand of cards, and it can be harder to overcome that. Others, they maybe seem like they have everything, but they just have another set of problems that they're dealing with. And this is something that actually I've come to see. We've had over 800 people go through our programs now, and it's actually like the biggest learning for me was you can have so many people, like, they look so different from the outside, whether it's a neurosurgeon, a primary school teacher, a nurse, a fireman, that are very different challenges in life, but underneath there's very similar things, because it's just that condition of being human. And so there's certain things that our brain is going to do. For example, it's, like I mentioned, it's going to start looking for threats, which means it's got an automatic negative bias. It really wants to keep you safe. So instead of like fighting against your brain, because it can feel like your brain and body are working against you, one of our goals with the program is to really create more coherence between the two. And so if you actually understand how to work with your brain, you can then kind of change the input to change the output. So yeah, simple things would be keeping a gratitude list, like flexing that gratitude muscle whenever you can. So whether it's sitting in traffic, instead of being focused on the traffic, can you be like, can I just sit and do something as simple as a longer exhale? That longer exhale is linked to the parasympathetic nervous system, which automatically sends a signal of safety and relaxation. So like a breathe in for 2 counts, breathe out for around 4 counts, and you just like widened your vision. You're not as much in survival. You've just let your mind relax somewhat, which will then make it easier to look for something to be grateful for. And again, when we're in any kind of situation of chronic pain, that can be harder, because it could take longer to flex that muscle and really build that muscle, but it is very much possible, and we've seen it happen. So just looking for those opportunities, whether it's waiting in line, setting a routine of like first thing in the morning or right before I go to bed, I think about or I write down these things that I'm grateful for. And then it just starts to program into that reticular activating system that it's going to start looking for them. And it is incredible how that can grow over time.
Lucy, it makes me think of, I love the camera analogy, right? The lens, right? You've got the wide angle lens where you're focused on everything. Then you've got the more narrowed focal lens where you're focused on just one thing, right? And it's funny how when we pivot to gratitude, how it allows us to find gratitude in any and everything. I talk about it all the time about being grateful for my grief journey. Who's grateful for their grief journey? Who's grateful for the debt that they accumulate? Who's grateful for, being on prescription medications and now being off? Who finds gratitude in that stuff? Me.
Yeah.
And because I feel like, again, it's like when you're looking for a certain car to buy and your brain, you're seeking it, it's going to come to you. It's going to find you. Right. And Lucy, for our audience, right, how can they, for 2024, start to ingrain this into their daily routine, right? I love how you brought up when you're stuck in traffic, right? And honor to their emotions of where they presently are. Because let's be realistic, right? We're about to embark on a new year. There's some people who might feel as though they haven't done enough, the woulda, coulda, shouldas. They haven't set a traditional, quote unquote, New Year's resolution list. So they feel as though their life can't change. But as you've mentioned, it's all about mindset and really being intentional about where you delegate your focus. So how can they, starting today, really start to acquire that and really get that ingrained in their mind and honor where they currently are today?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's many ways you can go about it. And the first and most important part is shifting the perception. And it's not about ignoring where we're at or minimizing the pain or emotions or ignoring them or numbing them. That's never a good strategy. That's actually, again, something we teach in our programs, is really feeling it and processing it so that the emotions don't stay somewhere and fester and then come out as, often it will fester and come out as a physical illness. There's a saying, what the mind represses, the body expresses, and that definitely happens. So if with zero resources, not being able to come to one of our programs or work with a therapist, it's actually been scientifically proven to be really helpful to just write out what are the emotions that we're feeling and really be able to express them. It's incredible if you've got an opportunity to do that within the community, obviously being wary of not dumping a lot of emotional baggage. I'm sure we've all been dumped on. It's not particularly fun, and not everyone has the capacity to be able to deal with that or even knows what to do. So it can cause a bit of a challenge. But if we have someone else who's able to support, it's really great to be able to process those emotions. And being able to, like you said, which is a really powerful position to be in, is being able to find the blessing in the difficult situation. And often it's very hard to connect the dots going forward. But for sure, I felt it in my own life. I've seen it a lot in our guests and friends, being able to connect the dots going back. It's often these difficult situations that really push our capacity, that really develop resilience. Resilience is one of my favorite words, so I love that you used it. And I would say that's, again, what our programs are about, how can we expand that capacity without getting to this really burnt out place or, almost nervous breakdown state, because our body's in this activated mode for so long. If we're just on that chronic, like hamster wheel of just always burnt out, always going, always in this defensive kind of threat mitigating state, that it's very hard to do anything from that position, because when we're in it, we call it sympathetic dominance, because when we're in the fight flight response, it's called the sympathetic branch of the nervous system. Very strange names: sympathetic and parasympathetic. Sympathetic is the activated and kind of fight, flight, freeze response. And when we're in that just all of the time, it's very depleting, because really what we're meant to do is be in that state to respond to a threat, and then go back into the parasympathetic state to be able to fully recover. An excellent analogy of this is an athlete. So they will purposely put themselves into a very stressed out state because they push themselves to the absolute limit because they want to be the best. but then they spend about 80% of the time on recovery. We actually are going to be presenting for the NHS in the UK about why don't we treat frontline workers like professional athletes? And I could say the same thing for just regular human beings. Why aren't we doing this? We go out and we push. We have a really challenging situation. How can we come back into that recovery state instead of just pushing and continuing on this, like running on fumes? So I think one is shifting our perception, but really understanding where we are at. And if that rings true of being in that kind of burnt out, very low energy space with very low capacity, it means that it's very hard to do anything because, one, we lose quite a lot of executive cognitive function. We go much more into the primal brain, which means that our decisions can become more impulsive, not particularly rational. And it's much harder to then get into these brain states, which are kind of called like alpha theta brain states, which are these lower, more calming brain states that are going to actually help us get into this kind of gratitude and helpful position. So really feeling it where you're at in your body and what can we do to help get into that recovery mode? Because I've been there where it's like, well, I could just sit and, rest. But when it feels like there's a mountain of pressure around you and there's a lot going on, or for example, with grief, it's quite hard to even pinpoint where the sort of exhaustion is coming from. Just saying, let's, watch a movie or, go to bed early, it's not necessarily enough. And so really trying to work to get into the parasympathetic nervous system state, the state of relaxation, digestion, and healing. So I mentioned one thing, which is breathing. It's free and it's really easy. And literally it's the connection between the rational mind and the autonomic nervous system. There aren't many things that directly connect. And so the more signals of safety you can send to yourself, the better. And the more internal safety you can create, the better outcomes we're going to see. And sort of not getting carried away on this kind of threat spiral when it feels very negative, not just continuing down in this negative loop, always trying to come back. And maybe that means saying no to more things, putting more boundaries, not isolating. Our nervous systems are designed to protect, but also to connect. And it can feel like you don't want to connect when you're in that burnout state, because we actually need to be in a particular nervous system state to want to connect and feel like we can. But it kind of is a negative feedback loop in the way of, if you feel isolated, your body then feels threatened if we're not connecting to others. So being able to connect as much as possible and writing out those things that how we're feeling. There's a phenomenal practice called morning pages. I forget her name, Julia. I want to say Julia Cameron, but I may be getting her surname wrong. She wrote The Artist Way. It's actually more focused on addiction, but it's just such a beautiful practice. It's so simple. All you need is a notebook and a pen. And basically it's just free writing, just streaming whatever's coming through your mind to get it out of your head. Because again, when your head's full of all these things that seem like threats, it doesn't leave much space to create the good stuff. And and so being able to get that out, and often when it's on paper, it feels less threatening. It can be somewhat amplified when it's in our heads. So combining that with really starting to focus on what you want to create instead of being very past focused, being, what do I actually want to bring in? What do I want my days to look like? What do I want this future to look like? And it might not be immediate, but the more clear we are on that, again, we can plant that into the reticular activating system to try and get there. If there's no direction, it can be a lot more challenging. And then in addition to that, a really common thing is like inflammation in the body can just exacerbate all of this. And it makes sense when we're in a particularly sad state to want the processed food, the comfort food. The stress in itself actually affects the gut biome, which then directly affects our mental health. There's a direct connection between the gut and the brain through the vagus nerve. And there's a ton of studies now. It's really fascinating about how the different strains of bacteria actually affect our mental state. It's called psychobiotics. So there's like certain strains of bacteria that they've been linked to anxiety, depression. And so the more we can do to help to reduce our stress levels, reduce our inflammation levels, try and feed our bacteria, our good bacteria in the best way, Again, on our program, we do this full gut reset because it's so important. It makes such a big, big difference when our gut's off, and it is a two-way street. And really being kind to ourselves. I think the other thing is just this negative voice that tends to appear. I mean, it's just, again, a common human condition. I know mine used to be pretty rough, and it can just being very aware of the thoughts. So a little bit more in the CBT realm of therapy, of like being very aware of the thoughts and not believing every story that comes up. So if you're feeling that you can't go outside, or you're not getting enough done, or you're not doing this, like being really gentle with yourselves to understand where you're at, and then knowing that if you're taking steps to overcome this, then that is enough. It doesn't have to be this perfect picture. And a beautiful quote I love, I think it's from Brianna Wiest, is the amount of pain is proportional to the potential. And again, this is something that we see over and over again, of being able to transform this, energy that can seem very negative and hard and dark. It often is then transformed into the most beautiful energy, because it creates so much potential and resilience. And that's been a incredibly rewarding thing to watch in our guests, of what they then go on to accomplish following these challenging periods. Often it's very bad before it gets really good. So just remembering that, because again, the brain doesn't like change. So when something changes, it's like, well, now it's done, now it's over, this is me now, and it's never coming back, and it's always going to be bad. And it's very hard for it to kind of see past the other side. But I can say from a lot of experience working with a lot of different people, it does get much better.
Lucy, it definitely does, right? Number one, it's about the intention.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, I love what you said. What the mind represses, the body expresses. It's going to come out somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. So let's be mindful of what we're taking in and how we're allowing it to exit from our internal out into the external.
Yeah.
So we're going to take another quick break right here on the Grief Grantor, everybody. When we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with Lucy Oliver.
Hello, join me, Stacey Bullock, host of Tools for Everyday Living, on E360's Positive Vibrations channel every Friday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on E360 TV.
All right, everybody, welcome back right here on the Grief Grantor. We are joined by Lucy Oliver from Reprecision Health. We're just having an amazing conversation about the connectivity between our mind and gut, and also our emotions as well. Lucy, before we jump into the next part of the conversation, if our audience wants to connect with you and learn more about your work and the program, is there a social media link or website you can share with us today?
Yes, actually, you can see it at the bottom of my name here. It's the name of our company. And the website is written the same, reprecisionhealth.com. And then we have our Instagram account, which is re.precision.health, and on Facebook, Reprecision Health. So you can join us there and see more about what we do.
Excellent, excellent. Lucy, you brought up something very key that I wanted to touch on, breath work. Because I know with grief, it almost feels as though you're breathing through a straw when you're going through grief. And I can always tell when I'm embarking on a grief journey, because the first thing that I notice is a change in my lung functionality or my breathing. And so could you share with us, Lucy, how breath work can not only be a key tool in shifting from this space of stress or grief to a state of calm, but also can you maybe demonstrate a fun breathwork technique that we can use to help us to get back to a state of peace?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I mentioned, a breath is pretty much the only connection that connects our conscious mind, our rational mind, with the autonomic nervous system. So it gives us this opportunity to be able to send messages to it effectively. And There's many different breathwork practices out there. It's not my specialty. We do have specialized breathwork practitioners on our programs, but there's some really simple breathwork practices that you can do and just incorporate into everyday life without taking up much time. That could be done literally anywhere. And I touched on one, which was just the extended exhale. So again, 2 branches of the nervous system, sympathetic, parasympathetic. The sympathetic is our activated fight, flight, freeze response, and the parasympathetic relaxation, digestion. And so basically our inhale is linked to the sympathetic branch, which is why when we get a fright, we tend to gasp. It's like, because our body's getting prepared to go and run, fight, whatever it needs to do, it's taking in that oxygen. And then our parasympathetic nervous system, the relaxation, digestion, healing response is tied to our exhale, which is why you probably noticed when you get into bed or you just lay down on your sun lounger on the vacation, it's that really nice like exhale. And so doing something as simple as breathing in for 2 counts and breathing out for 4 counts, it means that we're extending the exhale. And so this is amazing to do first thing in the morning, right before bed, even better, because it can send that relaxation signal to go to sleep. When we're in traffic and a bit stressed, great message to send to the body. When you're waiting in line and just have nothing else to do or you're a bit frustrated, great thing to do. Even better, middle of a difficult conversation, if you can bring yourself back to that and just do like a nice exhale, that can be life-changing if you can have that pause before a reaction, because what it's doing is it's also getting ourselves into that more rational mind, less survival primal brain. So I can do an example. It's so simple, but basically if you just sit comfortably, you can be lying down, eyes closed, eyes open. It doesn't matter too much. It's probably more relaxing with eyes closed, just not while driving or doing anything dangerous. And just breathing in ideally through the nose and out through the mouth. And specialized breathwork practitioners could probably give more information, but really what we want to do is we want to feel it in the belly as much as possible when we breathe in. So not doing this shallow sort of chest breathing, like you mentioned, Portia, that is quite common because when we're in that stress response, we have very shallow breathing. It's sort of like almost like a hyperventilation breathing. And so what we want to do is set a signal that it is safe and you can take in those deep breaths. So really consciously kind of feel it down into your belly. And so we'll do that for 2 counts. 2. And then just letting go. You can do that through your nose or your mouth for 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can emphasize it with a big sigh. So you could do like a in for 2. 4. And I can feel it. I just felt all of my muscles go like butter.
And thank you for doing that, Lucy, because I have to do that a lot now. And I don't know if it's a result of my grief journey where I can always tell that I'm about to embark on a new one, where immediately my body is going into, like what you said, the fight or flight. So I have to stop everything that I'm doing because every blue moon I have panic attacks. And sometimes I'm like, okay, I don't really want to have to call 911. Let me do a breathing activity. And 9 times out of 10, Lucy, if I just take that time to do it, I feel so much better. I don't feel as heavily weighted by everything. It's, I'm like, I even asked myself, what was I stressed about?
Right. Yes. Yeah. And that's like the reflex, being able to do that before getting into that spiral. And I think it sounds like you're able to better feel within your body when you're getting into that activated response. Whereas a lot of people, including myself, before I learned all about all of these tools, I would just be carried. I'd just be at the whim of it. So something would happen and that's it. Like, I'm ready to fight. I was actually laughing up there because my dog's here and she was growling. She went into that as you were talking about the stress response. She was in full stress response. But and so activated, looking, what's going on. And so being able to interrupt that pattern, again, it's sending this, what's creating a neural connection, a new neural connection, because the old one was, well, something bad happens and I react. Whereas the more you can interrupt that pattern, that, you know, you create a much healthier new pattern. And what it's doing too is it's really improving energy efficiency, because it takes a lot of energy of the body to get into that stress response and come out of the recovery state. And the more we do that and the more time we spend in that, the more depleted we're going to feel. And sometimes it's even harder to get into the recovery response. So it's just, yeah, this negative spiral going down. And so being able to do that just literally whenever, when you're cooking, right at work, even setting a timer and just doing even just 5 breaths. Because I know also what I found challenging was a lot of these practices, it's like an hour-long class or even like a 20-minute long class. If you've got kids or like a lot of responsibilities, doesn't sound like much, but it's a lot of time. And so I think what's more effective is just being able to come back into that, just like you said. Whenever you start to feel like you're shifting into that reactive state, can you just come back? And then you can do deeper breathwork classes. Like breathwork's incredibly powerful. And I think this just highlights how incredible the mind and the body are, because it can really tap into the subconscious. So there's things like holotropic breathwork. I mean, there's a whole host of breathwork these days, but it is working more in tapping into the subconscious, and it can lead to really big experiences, sometimes euphoric, really enlightening, similar to a plant medicine journey, but all endogenous, all coming from within you. And we do offer a breathwork class on our program, and I love hearing the shares afterwards, because I guess I have really, really big enlightening experiences. And we actually just touching on panic attacks, which is quite a common thing for many people. We had one guest who was dealing with such severe panic attacks. They were just multiple times a day on every form of transport, just kind of leaving the house. It became pretty much unbearable, and his life, he just couldn't really live his life. And so he ended up coming down on the program, and he's very successful, worked in tech, and just wanted to get back to living how he was living. And so the breathwork was quite uncomfortable for him at first, because it almost felt like the beginning of a panic attack. But by being able to carry on through and knowing these different tools to regulate his nervous system, and then realizing actually on the other side of this, I'm fine. Like, I got this and I'm fine. It just creates like a different, and it's called cognitive dissonance, when you, like, we're able to then change that and again create this new neural pathway of like, I've got this. And he left the program and was able to travel the world, and actually met up with him in Amsterdam. It was beautiful. So it's really nice to see on the other side, it's not this short-term thing. Like, it really can change these neural pathways, and it's the repetition, the consistency, that is what's required for neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity is the ability of your brain to reorganize. So it's made up of billions of neurons. These neurons are required to connect and communicate with each other, to be able to do everything from being able to talk to you right now to being able to walk. And so every time you learn something new, you're just creating these new neural pathways. Your brain's incredible. It's incredibly malleable. It can change. And so it can change somewhat in a negative way. When a big event, a traumatic event happens, you will see a big shift in the brain. But then also it's this incredible potential to shift positively and, you know, learn new things, create, I like to call it our operating system, like whatever programming we've had from all of our childhoods and our lives, we're actually able to shift that, which is just very empowering. If you feel like that's just what you're dealt and you just have to deal with it, it's I think that's when if you feel sort of powerless or hopeless, it can be easy to stay in that negative mindset. Whereas if you feel empowered to be able to do something about it, even if it takes time, it gives a lot of hope.
Or it's like the saying that people always used to regurgitate growing up: you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but you can reprogram your brain to acquire new information. 100%.
Definitely.
So we're going to take another quick break right here on the Grief Grantor, everybody. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Lucy Oliver.
Hey, this is Todd. I'm the host of Personal Development Hacks, where we talk about achieving your goals and living your best life. We can be seen at 7 p.m. Mountain Time on Tuesdays and Thursdays on Achieve TV. So come and join us on E360 TV.
All right, everybody, welcome back right here on the Grief Grantor show. We are joined by Lucy Oliver from Precision Health, and we were just having an amazing conversation, of course, about how we can expand our mind, how we can adopt breath work into our routine to really help us to have different breakthroughs, right? I mean, Lucy, I'm still fascinated by the story of this client who you had that, you know, was able to really turn his life around when he was crippled by panic attacks. Like, it's amazing. I think just the power of breath work in general, by how much it can really help us in so many different situations if we're open to taking the time to invest in it. You know, Lucy, I want to touch on something that you brought up. You know, you talked about, and this is something we talked about on the Grief Grantor earlier in the show, is about boundaries. And I feel like this is where it gets a little complex, I will agree, when it comes to setting boundaries, especially when you're in a season of grief, right? And so, Lucy, can you maybe provide some insights on how to effectively set boundaries that both respect ourselves and also others around us, other people around us, while also keeping the peace?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenging subject, and I think I'm still a lifelong learner in that area. But it is incredibly powerful to be able to set good boundaries, and it very much is a balance. So I think, first of all, really understanding yourself and where you're at, because sometimes too many boundaries, then it just becomes a cage. It just becomes incredibly isolating, and you're just pushing everybody away. And I think this is where it comes, like, really understanding yourself and having compassion for others too. Just that general knowledge about where our body's at, where our mind's at, being able to see that in others, and being able to be very clear with communication. I think clarity is so important in so many areas. First of all, being really clear as you can with yourself. I mean, everything, just like we mentioned about what we actually want, really understanding like where we're at. By writing, it's often a great way to get clarity of what's even going on in our mind. During grief, it's a confusing process. There's a lot of change happening, but the more clarity we can get. And I think rather than being like a pushing away, it can be just understanding the balance of how much social interaction and what's helpful. So how clearly can you communicate what is helpful? Because another issue is that a lot of people just don't know how to behave when somebody's in pain. Like they might want to help, but what they're doing is not helpful. They won't know that without feedback. So how can you very gracefully give that feedback? And I think graceful or tactful is maybe the key, which can be tricky, again, if we're in that survival brain of just like, I just don't want it. Just like react to it. So the more we can keep ourselves calm, the more we can be in that open focus, the more we can be in our like full executive function, the better job, it's a likely better job we can do of communicating clearly. First of all, even understanding what do we want and don't want, how to communicate that clearly, and doing that in a way that isn't going to be kind of offensive, but also understanding that we're not responsible for other people's emotions. Like, we're responsible for our behavior if we're not doing something to intentionally hurt or harm, but, you know, protecting ourselves in a certain way, that's kind of where the line is. And some people will not enjoy that. They won't enjoy the boundaries, especially people who have something to gain from there not being boundaries. So that's something else to pay attention to. But I think, especially with grief, that the key is not oversetting the boundaries, or being really clear, like, I just need time and space. You know, I'll be back. I just need time and space. This would be helpful. This isn't helpful. And I really appreciate you wanting to help, or you wanting to be here. Again, being grateful. You know, I'm very grateful for you. I'm really grateful for these things, but I need this right now. And for some reason, that seems quite hard for us to do. It was a big skill I had to develop. Again, I'm from England. I wouldn't say we're the best communicators. We mostly just suppress every emotion and pretend that everything's okay, which also isn't healthy. You know, it's fine to express it. We don't have to dump it on someone. Be like, this is what I'm feeling right now, but I'm working on it. What would be helpful is, you know, maybe your support in these areas. Otherwise, I don't need this or that. But obviously, every situation is going to be quite unique.
Lucy, I'm curious. This is just something that popped into my head. I know that you brought up about the brain scans that you guys do, right? I'm curious as of what a brain scan would show when someone sets a boundary.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, so when we're actually doing the brain scans, we just get a map. So we just get a map of what's happening. We have to do that with eyes closed and eyes open. So actually, we don't want the head to move much when this is happening, so we can get really good signal. And then, so we don't tend to do anything sort of interactive during the mapping. What we can do is we can see, for example, take a brain map. Someone sets a lot of boundaries. We take another map after a month or 2 months. And my guess is that we would likely see a lot more of the slow wave brainwaves, things like the alpha, theta, more relaxation brainwaves, and maybe less of the high energy, high beta brainwaves. So high beta corresponds to more of a monkey mind. You know, that voice that it's just going late at night. It's just like telling you about all your deepest, darkest fears, and that it's just going. It's like the monkey in the circus clapping the cymbals. It just doesn't want to shut off. It just keeps going and going and going. That one can be helpful in certain circumstances. It's like a nice high energy brainwave form of we're focusing. But what we want to do is be able to have a lot of flexibility between those different brainwave states. So my guess is that if someone feels like they've set boundaries, they're maybe not going to be ruminating quite so much on, oh, well, you know, this person said this thing. Did I offend this person? Did I do this? Did I do that? And having a lot of that going on. Whereas, you know, if it's very clear and you feel good about how that interaction happened and that it is actually protecting your peace and your energy, then it's most likely gonna result in some more relaxing brainwaves.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. You probably have what I call similar to like the gratitude, right? Where you'll have
Really
elevated, right? Because you'll feel more empowered that you were able to voice your needs and not feel the stress of, oh my God, is this person upset with me? Did I do this wrong? All the woulda, coulda, shouldas, right?
Absolutely.
So I think it would be equivalent. Lucy, first and foremost, I extend my gratitude to you for coming on the show. We're going to be wrapping up here soon, but I wanted to leave our audience with something empowering before we embark on 2024. You know, another thing that you touched on was adding more playfulness into our life, right? And I think as adults, we tend to diminish, right? We tend to diminish the amount of play or imagination because of what society says. So could you leave our audience with some words of encouragement or ways to incorporate more play into their life to make it more fruitful, more peaceful, more abundant for 2024?
Yes, I like that note. And I think I'm going to go quite deep on this one because this is something, again, I've seen in myself and others is, first of all, the way our society works currently is we're very much rewarded for achievement in whatever form that takes, financially, success, status. And we've very much applauded this culture of hustling and working really hard. And there's nothing wrong with those things when done in balance, but it does make it hard to find time or to justify just doing things for the fun of it. And again, it's very hard to play when we're in a very stressed, what we call sympathetic dominant state. So being stuck in that threat response for a really long time, it doesn't feel safe to play. It really doesn't. And so it's hard to then lower our defenses and just do something fun, because one of the stress responses is just always being busy. And everybody knows that person. I was that person 100%, and I still have to bring myself back out of it. When we're in that stress state, we just keep doing and doing and doing, because by doing it feels like we're doing something to get out of it. And so number one is To have more play, we need to try and get into that relaxation response as much as possible. That could be doing some simple things like the breath work, that simple 2-4 breath, writing down, getting out a lot of that stress that's in your head. Classes, things like TRE, we do one of those classes in our retreat. It's called tension release exercises. It gets you out of your head and into your body to release. It actually activates the body's natural mechanism for releasing adrenaline, which is really cool. And often come out of it feeling much lower stress. Moving's amazing. Anything that gets you out of here and into your body is just really helps. And can you move in a really fun way, or a way that it doesn't feel like a chore? You're not just going on the treadmill and just pounding the treadmill because you feel like you need to burn calories. Like, you're going and doing something fun. For me, I got really into like aerial yoga, which I'm not really a yogi, but I just loved it. It was just like fun, and it was playful, and it felt creative. Or is it cooking? Just cooking a different dish, or baking, or painting, or like finding that we actually do include arts and cooking classes. And what I love is that it's usually the men. It's usually the men that really enjoy them. They never want to go. They're like, oh, I don't want to go to this. We don't force anybody to do anything, but the men go. And I see them there like painting and getting really into it. And because it's something they would never do. They would never do it. And so can you go even better in a social situation? Can you put together something fun that there's no real, like you can put your energy in it, but there's no real outcome. Like you're not doing it for a specific outcome. And what I found is we often stop ourselves from really feeling the play and the joy and the fun, and stay in that kind of life is hard and I have to be productive mode, because there's a lack of self-love. We don't feel like we deserve it, and that we have to keep doing the other stuff. And out of all of the science and everything I've read, I feel like it always comes back to self-love. It could be very cliche. All of the ancient traditions come back to this, and I think they're right. But really it's looking at, well, what's covering that? Like, what are these different layers that are covering the self-love, and how can we work through those? Because when you really feel like that self-love's there, then you automatically going to feel more joy and more self-acceptance. Often a lot of people don't want to play games and do these things because they're so self-critical. I don't want to go paint something because it's not going to be good, or I'm not good at it, or like go sing karaoke because I'm bad. Doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter. You just enjoy it. And again, like a muscle, the more you flex it, the more you'll get into it, the more we'll look for it. Everything from, we even do like dance classes. I'm the most awkward dancer you've ever seen. And I got really into salsa, like Mexican cumbia music. I get just for fun. And I really, really, really love it and look forward to it. And so, yeah, the more we can do that. And I think this is a good gauge for being in the stress response, is how much can you enjoy and play? And if you just can't do that, even if you've got kids, I mean, if you can just go into their world for a while, it's like the best thing ever to disconnect, go into their magical world. If it's hard to do that, we're really stuck in that stress response. It's
100%. And I think, to your point, Lucy, is to adopt the curiosity of a child. Always stay curious and just do it for fun, no matter who's watching or who's not. Just do it for you at the end of the day.
Yes. Yeah, your brain will like it.
Well, everybody, that was Lucy Oliver that you heard from. And that concludes another episode here on the Grief Grantor. Happy 2024 to everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and see you in the new year.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on the Grief Grantor. May the story shared today light your path and guide your heart toward healing. Remember, with every moment of grief, there's an opportunity for gratitude, resilience, and empowerment. Continue your journey with us online and share your own story, because in this tapestry of life, every thread matters, especially yours.